Sharia, Power, and Political Correctness, the Rise of Islamic Influence in the UK and its Global Implications. Written by Aditi Joshi. Britain's failure to address grooming gangs, Sharia councils, and growing political Islam signals a deeper crisis, one that holds urgent lessons for societies navigating religious diversity and secular governance. The United Kingdom is facing a significant and mounting challenge as it grapples with the increasing influence of Islamic practices in its societal and political spheres. From the quiet expansion of Sharia law in certain communities to the rising political influence of Muslim groups, the UK is at a critical crossroads. However, this issue is far from being confined to the UK, it is a global concern with profound implications for many other countries. The spread of Islamic practices and their intersection with legal, social, and political structures sparks intense debate worldwide about integration, religious freedoms, and societal unity. Issues such as the prevalence of grooming gangs and the growing political influence of Muslim communities highlight the pressing need for both national and international discussions on safeguarding social harmony and cohesion in an era of rapid demographic change. A multicultural society at a crossroads. The United Kingdom, like many other Western democracies, has positioned itself on the world stage as a society that embraces a multicultural approach to integrating diverse communities. However, over time, the growing Muslim population has begun to present serious challenges. The increasing prevalence of Sharia law practices in certain British communities, the disturbing cases of grooming gangs, and the significant political influence wielded by Muslim communities in areas with large Muslim populations raise serious concerns about the future of British society. In particular, the question arises whether Britain is losing its secular character and allowing parallel systems of governance and law to take root. This has not only caused rifts within the British political landscape but has also drawn attention from other nations, particularly India, which grapples with similar issues of religious integration. As such, the debate over Islamic influence in the UK is more than just a national issue, it is a reflection of larger global conversations about religious freedoms, political influence, and cultural integration in an increasingly pluralistic world. It raises critical questions about the balance between respecting cultural diversity and preserving the core values of secularism and equality. Furthermore, as Islamic communities continue to grow globally, the way countries navigate such challenges will shape the future of multiculturalism worldwide. Growth of Sharia law in the UK. Over the past few decades, Islamic practices, including the implementation of Sharia law, have taken root in some regions particularly those with sizable Muslim populations. While Sharia law is not part of the formal legal system in the UK, the increasing use of Sharia councils has sparked debates about the place of religious laws in a secular society. These councils primarily handle family issues such as marriage, divorce, and inheritance, but critics argue that their rulings often clash with the principles of equality and human rights enshrined in UK law. Sharia councils operate in a legal grey area in the UK, as the Arbitration Act of 1996 allows religious institutions to settle disputes according to their beliefs. However, concerns have been raised about the lack of regulation, transparency, and potential for discrimination, especially against women. For instance, polygamous marriages and unequal inheritance rights are practices that some Sharia councils reportedly permit despite these being illegal under UK law. While some argue that these councils provide a means for Muslims to resolve personal matters within their cultural context, others believe they undermine British values of equality and fairness. The government maintains that Sharia law is not recognized in the UK legal system. However, the fact that these councils exist and thrive in some areas raises questions about whether the UK is allowing a parallel legal system to take root. The issue of Sharia law usage in the UK, especially in family matters, is often viewed as a test case for how far religious laws should influence secular states. Grooming gangs. One of the most shocking issues associated with the rise of Islamic communities in the UK is the menace of grooming gangs, groups engaged in the sexual exploitation of young girls. Over the past 2 decades, several high-profile cases have revealed that some grooming gangs consist of men from Muslim backgrounds, leading to heated debates about the role of Islamic communities in these abuses. There have been cases where older Muslim men have lured, kidnapped, and held underage non-Muslim, mainly white British girls, captive, allegedly under the guise of religious justifications. The brutalities committed were extensive but failed to get any attention from the mainstream, secular media. In one shocking account, a rape victim was described as having been forced to sleep with over 1,000 men. The most shocking part of the grooming gangs controversy is that authorities have been reluctant to thoroughly investigate these cases, purportedly, to avoid being accused of racism or Islamophobia. Critics point out that the lack of action has been influenced by political correctness and a desire to maintain good relations with minority communities, often for electoral reasons. Political influence of Muslim communities. In areas of the UK with Muslim-majority populations, there is a growing concern that Islamic institutions wield considerable political influence. This is particularly evident in local councils, where Muslim groups can dominate decision-making and shape local policies to align with their interests. Some view this as a natural consequence of integration and political participation, others see it as an increasing challenge to British secularism. The political influence of these communities is evident in various ways, from the election of Muslim MPs to the implementation of policies that cater to Islamic values and social practices. Critics argue that the prioritization of Muslim communities for electoral reasons may be fueling the perception of political Islam taking root in the UK. A common concern is that politicians eager to secure Muslim votes may overlook or tolerate practices that conflict with the broader values of British society. This raises a crucial question: where should the line be drawn between respecting religious freedoms and maintaining the country's secular values? British leaderships in action. At the heart of the debate over Islamic influence in the UK is the political leadership's role in allowing certain practices to flourish. Critics argue that the political elite has been complicit in permitting the rise of Sharia councils and the growth of political Islam as a form of vote bank politics. By pandering to Muslim communities for political support, some believe politicians have allowed serious issues like grooming gangs to go unreported or turned a blind eye to practices that could be harmful to the fabric of British society. The UK's leadership has shown a staggering lack of moral courage in confronting some of the most egregious crimes taking place within its borders. Time and again, political leaders have chosen cowardice over justice, avoiding uncomfortable discussions for fear of upsetting certain voter blocs or being accused of Islamophobia. Nowhere is this failure more evident than in the handling of grooming gang investigations, an issue that has been systematically ignored, downplayed, or outright dismissed by those in power. The UK Parliament's recent refusal to launch a national inquiry into grooming gangs is nothing short of a disgraceful abdication of responsibility. In January 2025, when a Conservative-led amendment proposing such an inquiry was put forward, it was crushed by an overwhelming 364 MPs voting against it, with only 111 in favour. A month later, the Welsh Parliament, Senedd, followed suit, rejecting a motion for a Wales-specific inquiry despite widespread public outcry and petitions demanding action. This spineless approach has not only betrayed countless victims but has also emboldened regressive forces within certain communities. By prioritizing political expediency over justice, UK leadership has effectively enabled a culture of impunity, weakening fundamental British values such as gender equality, the rule of law, and the protection of vulnerable citizens. Instead of standing firm against criminal networks and cultural practices that undermine social cohesion, they have capitulated, allowing political correctness to erode the very principles upon which Britain was built. Wake-up call for the world. The unchecked rise of Islamic influence in the UK, from the slow spread of Sharia law in certain areas to the horrifying grooming gang scandals and the escalating political dominance of Muslim communities, marks a dangerous and alarming transformation in Britain's social and political fabric. Hindus must wake up to this insidious erosion of Western society, as it is not just a distant issue, it has direct and severe consequences for India's stability and future. The patterns unfolding in the UK and the West are a warning, ignore them at your own peril. When regressive social practices are legitimized in powerful nations like the UK under the facade of multiculturalism, they set a dangerous precedent, emboldening similar forces worldwide. This erodes India's ability to resist such influences domestically, making it more vulnerable to ideological infiltration and social fragmentation. The growing political dominance of Muslim communities in Western democracies is not just a regional concern, it poses a direct threat to India's sovereignty and societal cohesion. Through aggressive lobbying, well-funded networks, and strategic influence over global narratives, these forces are actively shaping policies that can weaken India's position on the world stage and destabilize its internal unity. Hindus cannot afford to remain passive observers. This is not just political maneuvering, it is a calculated effort to reshape global power structures in ways that undermine India's cultural and national integrity. If these warning signs are ignored, the same forces will find their way into India, deepening internal divisions and threatening the nation's future. The time to recognize and resist this growing influence is now. As religious tensions escalate, India faces an urgent and mounting challenge, preserving its democratic values while navigating the harsh realities of an increasingly fragmented multicultural society. Religious freedom, a cornerstone of India's constitution, is now being weaponized, often clashing with fundamental human rights, enabling communal violence, and serving as a tool for political manipulation. Despite India's commitment to secular governance, the unchecked influence of certain religious ideologies, such as the creeping imposition of Sharia law, has led to the emergence of parallel legal systems that openly contradict the nation's constitutional framework. The violent opposition by Muslim groups to the proposed implementation of the Uniform Civil Code, UCC, is a glaring example of this resistance to legal equality. These protests, marked by widespread unrest, expose the deeper struggle between secular law and religious fundamentalism in India. As the world grapples with the challenges of integrating religious diversity within secular governance, the battle unfolding in India serves as a warning. If these trends are not confronted head-on, India risks becoming another casualty of unchecked religious appeasement, where national identity is compromised in the name of so-called multiculturalism. The time to act is now, before India's secular and democratic foundation is eroded beyond repair. For India, the stakes could not be higher. The nation stands at a crossroads, where it must decide whether to uphold its pluralistic heritage while maintaining the integrity of its democracy or succumb to the pressures of religious appeasement that threaten its secular foundation. While the rights of religious minorities must be protected, they cannot come at the cost of national unity, social equality, or the rule of law. India's future as a democratic, pluralistic state hinges on its ability to strike this balance, ensuring harmony without compromising the values that have defined its democracy since independence. As global pressures mount and internal religious tensions intensify, India's handling of these challenges will serve as either a model of resilience or a dire warning for other multicultural nations. The world is watching, and the decisions made now will set a lasting precedent. We are at a defining moment. How do we protect religious freedom without allowing it to undermine fundamental human rights? How do we safeguard democracy while preventing divisive religious agendas from eroding national unity? These are questions not just for India but for the entire world. The battle for multiculturalism's future is unfolding, and the choices made today will shape the global order for decades to come. Wrapping up. The unchecked rise of Islamic influence in the UK is not just a national crisis, it is a warning to the world. The failures unfolding in Britain today mirror the broader global struggle between religious integration, political influence, and societal cohesion. The lesson is clear: if a society does not firmly uphold its fundamental rights and values, it risks succumbing to fragmentation, instability, and the erosion of justice. Nowhere is this failure more apparent than in the UK Parliament's disgraceful refusal to initiate a national inquiry into grooming gangs. This shocking decision exposes a leadership that has lost its backbone, too afraid to confront uncomfortable truths for fear of upsetting certain voter bases. Instead of prioritizing justice and protecting vulnerable citizens, the UK government has chosen political expediency, enabling criminal networks to operate with impunity. The refusal to launch an inquiry has been met with widespread condemnation, particularly from survivors who have been betrayed by a system designed to protect them. Christina O'Connor, a survivor of the Huddersfield grooming gang scandal, condemned the government's inaction, warning that this failure not only abandons victims but also paves the way for similar horrors to continue unchecked. This blatant disregard for justice and accountability has emboldened divisive community leaders, allowing them to tighten their grip on local politics while British values, such as gender equality, the rule of law, and the safety of children, are systematically undermined. The government's refusal to take decisive action is not just negligence, it is complicity in one of the most egregious social injustices of our time. Britain's crisis is a wake-up call for the world. The unchecked rise of Muslim dominance in multicultural societies is not just a British problem, it is a global threat to democracy, justice, and social cohesion. If Britain, once a pillar of democratic values, continues down this path of appeasement, it sets a dangerous precedent for other nations. The time for willful blindness is over. Societies must confront these challenges with courage, rejecting political correctness and prioritizing the rule of law, human rights, and national identity. The future of democratic nations depends on recognizing this growing threat before it is too late.